So, what would you do if someone stole your book idea? Well, I'm not going to tell you it never happens because it actually happened to my wife. So, today we're going to talk about one of the hottest topics I see from aspiring authors. How do you protect your book from being stolen by someone else? I'm going to share everything we learned about copyright infringement, protecting IP, and how we responded to the culprits. Hello, hello. Welcome to Four Word Writing, the channel where we talk all about how to move your writing forward. I'm Jonathan Jordan. I'm an award-winning ghostwriter and book coach. I've been working in publishing since 2018. My clients have accumulated over 50 awards. And last year, I was also nominated for the Andy Award for ghostwriting, which is the only award that they give for ghostwriting in the industry. So, in my 8 years now of experience, I've been in a lot of different situations, but one of the scariest happened very early on in my career when my wife's book idea was stolen by someone else. So I'm going to share that story today so you can see what we learned about copyright infringement and how you can protect your work and how you should respond in the rare event of someone taking your work and stealing your ideas. So, a quick little caveat, this is not legal advice. I'm not an IP lawyer, but what I can do is share our experience, how we responded to this situation, and everything that we learned in the process, which did end up helping me out a ton with future clients. If you have a real concern about your work being stolen or that someone took your idea, then you should always consult an IP and copyright expert. An IP attorney as the best person to reach out to so that you can get up to date information, since laws do sometimes change a little bit. And depending on the situation, the advice is going to look different for you. Let's get a little bit into the story itself and the context, because the context here matters quite a bit. So, my wife and I, we are an adoptive family. We adopted our oldest son in 2014. And because of that, we were always getting questions. We were one of the first couples in our friend group who had gone through an adoption. So, people were always reaching out to us, asking us how we did it, especially since his adoption was a little bit unusual compared to what they had heard about before. And people were always consulting with us. We even co-led a ministry at our old church that was focused on foster care and adoption. And people were always asking my wife for resources of what are some of the things that we should be thinking about for our family before we make this decision. And so she would always give them recommendations of books that we had read, but none of them quite fit the need of what people were asking for. So in 2018, my wife decided to self-publish a guide called Before You Adopt. And it was really built around all of those questions that she would get from people and the questions she would teach them to ask. Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Stuff that wasn't being covered in other adoption related literature at the time. Now, around that same time, I had just started my business. I was still learning how to be a developmental editor. And so I told her, I said, hey, I will edit your book because I need the practice and it'll help me build my portfolio. So I worked with her deeply on it and taking feedback from beta readers and making sure that the book would be ready for its release. So in 2019, she was even traveling to some conferences where she would have a booth or be on a panel. And she would always take copies of her book along, of course, so that she could sell it there at the conference. Well, at one conference early on, there was a lady at a different booth for an adoption education organization. And the lady came by. She picked up one of the books, flipped through it, just kind of not really commenting too much, just kind of flipping through it and saying, interesting. And so my wife, because she had seen where that lady had come from and that she was, one of the other booths at the conference, she thought, you know what, I'm going to let her have this copy for free and, we can follow up later. Maybe there's some opportunity for future collaboration or partnership. So she gave that copy of her book for free, just planning to follow up later on. And in 2021, that lady and her business partner announced that they had an exciting new resource coming out, a guide and accompanying video course all about the questions you should be asking yourself before you adopt. Now, these two ladies, they were also growing on social media, especially on Instagram at the time. They were outpacing my wife's growth. So yeah, they were starting to become a name. They were picking up followers left and right. And so people were genuinely excited about this announcement. Well, we had a friend who had participated in their video course when they had reached out to her and asked her to do so. And then afterwards, they sent her a preview of their guide, and our friend's heart sank because she knew about our book. She had supported our book. She had told people about our book. And their book reminded her an awful lot of our guide. So she reached out to us, kind of let us know the scoop, and then she gave us a copy of the book to examine. Now, as we went through the book, there were no outright instances of copy paste wording, but there were a lot of unsettling similarities in the language and the questions that were being used. So we flagged everything in the guide with sticky notes that we felt was a little too close for comfort. Okay. Now, at the time, I was not a full-time writer or editor. I was still working a 9 to 5 for a Christian media company. And we had an IP expert who was on our staff because of the type of media that we dealt with. So I reached out to him, approached him for some advice about, hey, what should we do here? So he took a little bit of time to examine the material for himself. He said, give me a few days. And when we came back to him to ask, hey, what should we do? His answer genuinely shocked us. He said, nothing. Don't do anything right now. So to be honest, we didn't like hearing that at all. We were ready to go after these people, expose them, accuse them of taking our ideas and trying to make money off of it for themselves. But as he unpacked his advice, it made a lot more sense. First, he said, you know what? Take the high road. Okay. Their book isn't even officially out yet, so you can't prove that there's been financial harm to your business and to your book. And then he also said, you don't really have anything to gain by going after them. In fact, if anything, you're going to lose in that situation because you could come across looking like the jealous bad guy, especially since they have a bigger following than you do. If they have a lot of supporters and you're attacking them, then that's not going to look good online. So we had to consider that. And then he also told us that in cases like this, if there actually has been some kind of idea theft, he said that it usually comes back to bite the person. Now, spoiler alert, that last comment ended up being straight up prophecy. So one of the most interesting things that we learned in that conversation with him that I think every writer should know, whether you are writing fiction, nonfiction, memoir, poetry, whatever it is that you are writing, one of the most important pieces of this puzzle is this. You cannot copyright an idea. You can only copyright the presentation of an idea. And so that's where he said it didn't make sense taking legal action yet, is because, yeah, it looks like they took the idea, and some of the language is eerily similar, but none of it is exactly the same. So it's very, very difficult to prove plagiarism because people have similar ideas all the time. After listening to all of that and discussing it between the two of us, we decided, you know what, let's follow his advice and let's just not say anything, which was hard for us because they kept promoting their guide. They were making a big deal out of it. And we were just sitting there feeling like we were kind of twiddling our thumbs or like we were being too meek or too weak or something, right? Now, here's where things started to get a little bit crazy. Without us even having to do so, without us having to raise the alarm, people started speaking up for us. So, people in our community who had read my wife's book, who had used my wife's book, who had promoted it, they started commenting on this other group's posts about my wife's book. And they were saying things like, this sounds a lot like Krista's book. This is eerily similar. In fact, the comments were so many that this group ended up having to do a post where they featured their guide right next to my wife's guide, which honestly was kind of stupid on their part. And so they did this post talking about how no, the guides are different, even though there is some crossover. And, part of why that was stupid for them to do is they didn't even ask for my wife's permission to do that post. They didn't reach out and say, hey, are you comfortable with us doing it? They just did it to try to protect themselves and to move into defense mode. So we just kind of sat back, made a little bit of popcorn, and just started watching this happen. As a side note, there were a lot of other problems with this group, even beyond the situation with my wife's book. They were ripping off other people's social media posts, and other people were starting to notice that. So if a post from another content creator who was in the adoption space, if it blew up, then they would sometimes literally straight up copy paste, maybe make a couple of tweaks, but they would make it their own post. In fact, they had done that with a couple of my wife's posts even. So they already had a pattern of taking ideas and content from other people, and people were finally starting to notice this happen. But then they finally shot themselves in the foot. So one day they did a post where they announced that they had a new exciting partnership with a pretty large adoption education organization, really the type of group we would have loved to work with, and that this partnership was being built around their guide and how the guide was, quote unquote, unlike anything else out there. Yes, they actually used that language. Well, we didn't have to say anything. People spoke up for us, and they reached out to the organization and they said, hey, do you know about this other book that came out first? Because what they're saying isn't true, that there's nothing else like their guide. And so one day, my wife noticed a book order in her inbox because most of her books she sold herself on her own website. Yeah, we got some orders from Amazon as well, but most people were ordering her book directly from her at the time. She saw this order from the director of that big organization. And so all that we could conclude was, oh, she's going to check out the similarities for herself between the two books. We really think that's what she did because within a couple of weeks, that large organization did their own post announcing that they were dissolving the partnership that had been announced. And it was like a domino effect. Within a couple of months of that announcement, the group was exposed as frauds, and there were several other things that came out about them. And eventually they completely fell apart and no longer exist. So my coworker who predicted that situations like this, they usually end up committing self-sabotage, that's exactly what happened to them. Like I said, that was our experience. That's what happened to us with my wife's nonfiction book. But I think all authors can learn from this. So let's zoom in for a second. And what can you learn from our situation for your own book? First up, something I see all the time is new authors are worried that someone else is going to steal their idea. Most of the time, you don't have to worry about that. People have their own ideas that they want to develop. Frankly, most people are just not as in love with your book idea as you are. And that's how it should be. You should be the most passionate person about your book idea. My wife's situation was a rare, rare case where someone else who had a pattern of taking ideas from other people saw an opportunity for themselves. And they knew how to work around the system. They knew that you can't copyright an idea. They knew that if they just changed the words enough, that they would legally be in the clear. So, to reiterate, the next thing that we can learn from this is you cannot copyright an idea, no matter how brilliant you think your idea is. The only thing you can copyright is the text on the page. Okay, you can copyright that intellectual property, but not the idea itself. So, third, that gets us into intellectual property, which is also known as IP. So, your IP is already covered under US copyright law as soon as you create it. So, again, if you're watching this from a different country, you need to check your country's laws around copyright. I'm speaking specifically about US copyright law. Okay, as long as you have documentation that shows the date when you created your manuscript, you already have protection. So if you've ever noticed when you create a new Word doc on your computer, it has a timestamp on there. It has a digital timestamp that shows when you created it. So even if you do something like email your manuscript to an editor or email it to an agent who has requested it, again, that's further digital proof that you owned the work before they saw it. So you already have some protection. There's no need for you to rush out and go buy a US copyright registration too early. And unfortunately, that's bad advice that I see given frequently online. A new writer will post, "Hey, I finished my manuscript. I want to send it out to agents." And someone else inevitably will chime in, "Hey, you better get that copyright registration so that no one steals it." That's very, very outdated advice from before the digital world. Unless you wrote your entire manuscript on a typewriter and that's the only copy that exists, then you really shouldn't be worried, okay? Now, I'm not saying don't ever get your US copyright registration because you should. Before you publish, you should have a copyright registration paid for. Publishers do that for you if you're going the traditional route. But if you are doing self-publishing, then once you've got that final version of your book, absolutely, you need to go get your US copyright registration for that additional layer of protection. You just don't need to do it right away as soon as you finish the manuscript, okay? Because if you're still revising and you make substantial changes, then that copyright registration isn't even going to hold up anymore. Look, if you move a couple of commas, sure, fine. But if you rewrite a paragraph, you might as well have just burned that money. Okay. So don't run out and get that US copyright too early. And finally, even if someone takes your idea, like what happened with my wife's book, it's always better for you to take the high road, just like we were advised to do, unless you can prove financial harm and outright plagiarism. But pursuing legal recourse right away, it's usually just going to make you look like a bad guy. And also, it can be expensive and time consuming. Okay. Even if all you're doing is sending an official cease and desist letter from a lawyer, you still have to pay that lawyer for the time they put into sending out that letter on your behalf. So you want to be cautious about doing that too early. Now, yes, there's a time and place for it, but be discerning. And you certainly, whatever you do, you don't need to go online and attack the people that you suspect of taking your idea. Do not make yourself into the bad guy. If you've built a community, then people will stand up for you, just like what happened for us. So writing is already a solitary business. It's hard because you spend so much of your time completely on your own. And that's why building a community of writers is so, so valuable. You need to get out there and be a good literary citizen. Join a writing group. Okay, even if it's an online one, if you can't get out or you live in a really rural area where there's not a lot of opportunity, there's a ton of writing groups online. You can connect with people online and form your own writing group, do a weekly Zoom. I've done that before. I've been part of a Zoom writing group before. You can join a local book club, you can join a critique group, or if you're a freelancer, if you have a writing business of some kind, then you can join a professional organization, whether that's ACES, which is a professional editors organization, EFA, which is also a professional editors organization, or the Association of Ghostwriters, which is the organization that I'm currently in. There's so many ways that you can build community and have support and people who are going to speak up for you and help you out if a situation like this ever happens. Never forget that there is strength in numbers. So, to just kind of sum everything up, don't be so terrified someone's going to steal your idea that you don't move your writing forward. Okay. Don't be afraid to send that query out to agents. Don't be afraid to share your work with the critique group. You have proof that you are the original creator. Okay. So don't let that fear keep you from success. Don't let it hold you back. But also, make sure you build that community around you. Make sure you have people who love you, care for you, and support you, and who you are supporting in return. So if you haven't already done so, make sure you are subscribed to Forward Writing so you can get more writing tips, behind the scenes look at publishing, and book marketing advice all right here. You can also subscribe to my free newsletter over on Substack, which is called 4-Word Writers. Okay, this is 4-Word Writing on YouTube. 4-Word Writers is over on Substack. And if you have a friend, a writing friend out there who needs to hear about this and has asked this question, make sure you share this video with them. But until next time, keep sharing your story, keep writing, keep moving your writing forward, because I really do believe we can change the world one story at a time.